Hi everyone. So the question I'm going to answer today is, should I start learning programming in Python? And what I mean by that is I've never written a program in my life before I want to start out. A lot of people want to know what language should they start with. And a lot of people tell them that Python is the right language to start with because it's easy and you can do a lot with it and it will get you into things very quickly. All of those things are true about Python, but there's sometimes, I'd say maybe even most of the time, where learning Python as your first language is not a good idea. And that really depends on who you are. The thing is, if you want to go into writing software as a career, that is what you want to do, you want to write code, I can almost certainly say you should not start with Python. And the reason is because of the syntax, and let's go into that.
Okay, so let's start with a language like JavaScript. JavaScript is a very common web programming language that today is also used for server-side stuff. It's something that a lot of developers know. So in JavaScript, if we want to do something simple, I'm just going to do a loop that goes through 3 times and prints what's in it 3 times. So I'll start out by declaring a counter for the loop, calling it I, var I equals 0 to start it at 0. Then we're going to go while I is less than 3, because that's what we want to do. We want to go 3 times. We will do these little curly braces that you see. These curly braces signify what is and is not inside the loop. So keep that in mind. We can tab forward, we can go back. It's good form to tab forward, but you don't have to. So I'm just going to do an I++. That's something that you can do in other programming languages, even as old as C. And then I'm going to do a console.log and just say hello. And you might also notice that in JavaScript, I'm ending every statement with these semicolons. So that's also from C, where in C you would end each statement with a semicolon. So let's go ahead and try this out. And as you can see, it works. Now watch this. I'm going to go ahead and push these back and not indent anything and run it. And it works. However, if I get rid of the semicolon, actually in JavaScript it may still work. It does. You don't always have to have a semicolon in JavaScript, but you generally do. It's good form. And there are some cases where you do need it. Now watch this. Watch what happens if I get rid of one of these curly braces and try to run it. It doesn't work because it expects that curly brace. It needs to know when that while loop ends, but it doesn't care about the spacing at all. I can even put this way over here and then run it, and it will still work. So the spacing doesn't matter in programming languages like JavaScript. So let's go to another programming language. I'm just going to do a new REPL, and let's do one in C. It's been a little while since I've actually written anything in C, but let's see if I can get through it. So this one comes with a nice little, starting thing. You can see these curly braces here. These are to signify where the main function starts and ends. So inside of main, which I need to have, I'm just going to keep the printf hello. I'll just do, instead of world hello, to keep it the same as the other thing. And let's do something similar. I'm going to do int I equals 0. And then I'm going to do a while loop here, while I is less than 3. And I will do my curly braces, as I should. And I'm going to cut this from here and put it in here. And I will indent it, not because I need to, but because it makes it look nicer. So I will also do I++ as I did before, end it with a semicolon, and watch me run this. Okay, so you can see it prints hello 3 times. Now, similarly, what happens if I remove these curly braces? So if I run this, you can see I get an error because it needs me to have those curly braces there so it knows whether or not I'm within the while loop. So what if I misspace these things and space these all weird? Will it still work? Well, yes, it actually will. Not even C cares about your spacing. So let's just, put that back so it looks pretty again. We still do space well because we want people to be able to read our code. And we still, try to make things look good, but you don't actually have to in a language like C, and it will still work. And, in this case, no semicolon also means no go. So that is how most languages work. And these are most languages you're going to use in software development. Even C, an older language, you can see uses these same concepts. So let's go and do another thing in Python. So I'm just going to choose good old Python here. Well, I guess it's really the newer version, but let's create it. And I'm going to show you how Python is quite different, and you're going to see it in several ways. So I want to do the same thing here. So I'm going to start doing I equals 0. You don't need to, declare the variable, although in JavaScript you don't really have to either. It's just what you're supposed to do. In Python, you just say I equals 0. Then let's go and try to do a while loop. Well, you're going to see this looks a lot different. So while I will do I is less than 3. I don't have to put parentheses, and I actually need this colon here. So after that, I'm going to go down space, and I am going to, I think it's just mad that I don't have anything in here. So I'm going to do I plus plus, and then I am going to do, oh, it's upset because of my old habit of the semicolon. And then I will do print hello. And again, I'm not super into Python, but oh, that's why it's mad. See, this is another thing I can't do, is I can't do I++, which is something I can even do in C. So I actually have to do I equals I plus 1. And then it will be happy with me. So you can see there's a lot of differences here, but let me show you one of the big ones. So it does what we want. This is the same program written in Python. What if I were to do this? What will happen now? So now I just get 1. And why is that? Well, it's because Python cares about the spacing. So that doesn't seem too bad, but what if you had copy-pasted some code and it didn't honor your tabs, right? So what if I go and put a space here, right? Now all of a sudden this doesn't work. It gives me an indentation error. And this little program has a nice little thing where it draws lines so I can more easily see what's going on. Not all programs do that, and there are also programs that do an even better job than this. But if you're passing code around, you don't really know what program someone might be looking at it in. So yeah, best thing to do is to just keep using tabs to try to avoid this. But my argument here is that a little space is a lot easier to not notice than a big semicolon, or much better, the curly braces.
Okay, so what am I saying here? Am I saying that Python's a bad language and you shouldn't start with it? Well, it actually depends. So if you are going into a field where you write code a lot, basically software development of some kind, where your main job or one of your main things will be writing code, I wouldn't at this point in time recommend starting with Python. The reason I wouldn't is because of what I just showed you. The syntax is very different, and even though the language itself is great, if the first set of habits you learn are the Python habits, it's going to make it hard when you go to the other languages. And what I mean by that is take the curly brace, for instance, or the semicolon that I even habitually did coming from the other side. Well, that will not only not be built in if you go to a language like, say, JavaScript or C, it will be the opposite of that. And you can see me tripping over that coming the other way, that it does go the other way if you are coming from the C-based languages and those were your first languages. These things are going to trip you up in Python. And for me, it was especially the indentation that made it harder for me to get into it. Now, I eventually got past that and I was able to write a few functions in Python. In fact, I find the ease of integration with Python makes it such a great language. And I'm not saying it's bad just because it's different, because, things can be different and not be bad. What I'm saying is if you are trying to learn your first language and you want to get into software development, unless you are particularly chasing after something that is Python related, I would not start with Python. Now, that's not to say it's not a good language to pick up. It certainly is. Once you get better at picking up languages, it will actually not be so bad to go from these C-based languages to Python. Now, there's also a time where it does make sense for you to start with Python, and that is if you're not really going into, say, software development. You want to be some kind of server admin. You want to do a technical role, maybe, an IT role that is not just purely coding, but it's something that you want to be able to have in your tool belt, basically. That's where I'd say Python is great. If you're not looking to get into a career where writing large applications is your main gig, then I would say Python is an excellent thing to pick up. It's something that a lot of technical people use, and even some non-technical people use, because it's not really the same as other programming languages. It does make it easier to get into it, and those habits aren't going to haunt you as much if you're not going to try to make a career out of writing in the more C-based languages. So I hope I've explained myself. I hope I don't get too much hate from the Python fans out there. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad language. It's really not. It's a great language. But if you're trying to start learning programming, I would go with one of the C-based languages. My personal favorite to start learning with is C itself. Even though C isn't used for large applications much today, it's mostly used for lower level things. It's still a great way to learn because most languages are based off of C. So you're really learning from the ground up at that point, which will give you a better idea of what you're doing, no matter what language you choose, including Python. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out, and it lets me know which of these videos you actually care about. And if you like this video, please give it a like, and have a good night.